February 1944. The jungles of New Guinea hang heavy with humidity and the distant percussion of artillery. An American soldier named Ed Downey is walking through an abandoned Japanese foxhole when he sees something that stops him cold. There, sitting in the mud and tangled roots, is a dog. Not a jungle stray. Not a local breed adapted to the tropical hell of the Southwest Pacific Theater. A Yorkshire Terrier. For pounds. 7 inches tall. Staring up at him with eyes that shouldn't exist this far from civilization. Downey has no idea how this animal arrived here, in one of the most contested pieces of real estate in the Pacific War. There are no nearby villages. No Allied bases close enough for a mascot to have wandered from. The Japanese forces that dug this foxhole have been pushed back, but their presence still lingers in booby traps and sniper nests. This dog has no identification, no collar, no indication of ownership, just matted fur, hunger, and a strange, unshakable calm in the face of chaos. Downey picks her up. She weighs less than his rifle. He carries her back to his unit, and within hours soldiers are pooling their money. Not to buy supplies, not to gamble, to play poker for the chance to keep this impossible creature. The pot reaches 2 Australian pounds. A corporal named William Wynne wins. Wynne is a photographer with the 26th Photo Reconnaissance Squadron, 5th Air Force. His job is to document the war from the air, capturing intelligence images of enemy positions, troop movements, and damage assessments. He flies in unarmed planes, relying on speed and altitude to avoid being shot down. It is exhausting, dangerous work. Men die in his unit regularly. The jungle is an enemy as lethal as any Japanese battalion. Malaria, dysentery, and dengue fever kill more soldiers than bullets. Morale is a currency more valuable than ammunition. Wynne names her Smoky. He has no idea what he's just won. For the first few weeks, Smoky is a curiosity. Soldiers gather around her, marveling at her size, laughing when she fits entirely inside Wynne's helmet. She becomes a fixture in the camp, trotting between tents, sleeping in ammunition boxes lined with spare cloth. Wynne feeds her from his rations, shares his cot, teaches her tricks to entertain the other men. She learns to spell her name with alphabet blocks. She walks tightropes strung between poles. She plays dead when someone shouts, "Hit the dirt," during air raids. It's a distraction, a small piece of joy in a place designed to strip joy away. But war has a way of testing everything it touches. And Smoky is about to be tested in ways no dog her size should ever face. New Guinea in 1944 is a landscape of contradictions. Lush, green, beautiful from a distance. Up close, it is a suffocating maze of jungle, swamp, and volcanic rock. The Allied forces are building infrastructure as fast as they can, constructing airstrips to launch bombing campaigns against Japanese-held territories. These airstrips are lifelines. Without them, planes cannot take off, cannot resupply, cannot provide the air superiority that will eventually win the Pacific War. Every day of delay costs lives. At one airstrip under construction, engineers face a problem. They need to run a telegraph wire beneath the runway to connect communication lines on opposite sides of the field. The wire is essential for coordinating aircraft movements, relaying intelligence, and maintaining contact with command. Without it, the airstrip is dangerously vulnerable to miscommunication and operational failure. The problem is the pipe. 70 feet long, 8 inches in diameter, buried 3 feet underground beneath the metal matting of the runway. The pipe is the only route for the wire, but it is a death trap for human workers. To dig up the runway would take days. It would require heavy equipment, dozens of men, and complete exposure to potential Japanese air raids. The airstrip would be non-operational during the entire process. Planes would be grounded. Missions would be scrubbed. The tactical advantage gained by this position would evaporate. The engineers discuss their options. None are good. They consider sending a man through the pipe, but the space is too narrow. A soldier would have to crawl on his stomach through 70 feet of pitch-black, unventilated metal tube. If he gets stuck, if he panics, if the pipe collapses, he dies. And even if he makes it through, he would have to drag a heavy telegraph cable with him. The risk is too high. Someone mentions the dog. Wynn's dog, the tiny Yorkshire Terrier that weighs less than a field radio. The dog that can fit inside a helmet. Wynn is approached by his commanding officer. The request is absurd. Smoky has never been trained for this. She is not a military working dog in any official capacity. She was found in a foxhole by accident. She performs tricks for entertainment. But the officer is desperate, and Wynn knows what is at stake. If this doesn't work, men will spend days exposed to enemy fire, digging up an airstrip. If it does work, the job is done in minutes. Wynn agrees. They bring Smoky to the pipe. It is a length of corrugated metal culvert, half buried in the dirt, stretching 70 feet from one end of the airstrip to the other. The interior is dark, cramped, and coated with a thin layer of moisture and grime. There are no lights, no ventilation, just a long, suffocating tunnel that bends slightly in the middle, making it impossible to see the other end from the entrance. Wynn ties the telegraph wire to Smoky's collar. It is a thin cable, but to a 4-pound dog, it represents significant weight. The wire will drag behind her as she moves, creating resistance with every step. If she stops, the mission fails. If she turns around, the wire tangles. If she panics and refuses to move forward, the entire plan collapses. Wynn kneels at the entrance of the pipe and looks into Smoky's eyes. He speaks to her, his voice calm, steady. He has trained her to respond to verbal commands, to trust his voice even when she cannot see him. But this is different. This is not a trick performed in front of cheering soldiers. This is 70 feet of isolation, darkness, and uncertainty. He places her at the entrance. She hesitates. The pipe is alien to her. The smell of metal and damp earth. The echoing emptiness. She looks back at Wynn, waiting for instruction. He calls her name. She does not move. He calls again. Nothing. The soldiers watching begin to murmur. This is not going to work. They prepare to abandon the plan, to start the process of digging up the runway. Wynn tries one more time. He moves to the far end of the pipe, 70 feet away, and kneels at the opposite entrance. He calls her name, his voice echoing through the metal tube. And this time something shifts. Smoky hears him. She recognizes the sound. She steps into the pipe. The first few feet are hesitant. She moves slowly, the telegraph wire dragging behind her, scraping against the corrugated metal. The darkness swallows her. Wynn cannot see her. He can only call her name, over and over, hoping she continues forward. The soldiers at the entrance hold their breath. They can hear the faint sound of her paws tapping against the metal, the drag of the wire. But they cannot see her. They do not know if she is still moving. 30 feet in, Smoky stops. The wire has snagged on a ridge inside the pipe. She pulls, but it does not give. She is alone, in the dark, with no way to know how far she has come or how far she has to go. Wynn cannot reach her. He can only keep calling. She pulls again. The wire shifts. She moves forward. 50 feet. 60 feet. The soldiers at the entrance can no longer hear her. Wynn's voice is the only sound, echoing through the pipe, distant and distorted. He keeps calling. His throat is raw. He does not know if she is still moving. He does not know if she has collapsed, exhausted, in the middle of the pipe. He only knows that if she stops, this mission is over. And then, after what feels like an eternity, a small brown shape emerges from the far end of the pipe. Smoky steps into the sunlight, the telegraph wire trailing behind her, intact. She is covered in grime, panting, exhausted. But she has done it. The soldiers erupt. Some cheer. Some laugh in disbelief. Wynn scoops her up, holding her close, feeling the rapid beat of her tiny heart against his chest. She has just completed a task that would have taken a full engineering crew days to accomplish. She has saved lives. She has kept an airstrip operational during one of the most critical phases of the Pacific campaign. But no one writes a commendation. No one files a report to military command. Smoky is not a recognized war dog. She is not part of the official K-9 Corps. She was never trained at the War Dog Training Center in Front Royal, Virginia. She was never assigned a service number. She is, on paper, nothing more than a mascot, pet, an anomaly, and yet, the men who witnessed what she did will never forget it. Win will spend the rest of his life telling this story. Engineers will shake their heads in disbelief when they hear the details. Historians will later struggle to find official documentation, because Smoky's heroism was never supposed to happen. She was not supposed to be in a war zone. She was not supposed to save lives. She was not supposed to exist in the historical record at all. But she did. And her work is only beginning. The telegraph wire mission makes Smoky a legend within the 26th Photo Reconnaissance Squadron, but it does not change her daily routine. She still sleeps in Win's tent, still eats from his rations, still performs tricks to lift the spirits of exhausted soldiers. She flies on combat missions, sitting in Win's lap or perched on the edge of the cockpit, watching the jungle roll by beneath them. She survives air raids, taking cover with the men when Japanese bombers appear overhead. She endures tropical storms, disease, and the relentless grind of jungle warfare. But Win begins to notice something. When Smoky is around, soldiers behave differently. They smile more. They relax. Men who have been silent for days suddenly speak, reaching out to pet her, to hold her, to feel something soft and alive in a world dominated by metal and death. She becomes a presence that soldiers seek out, not because she can perform tricks, but because she offers something intangible. Comfort, normalcy, a reminder that life exists beyond the war. Win starts taking her to field hospitals. These are makeshift facilities, canvas tents filled with wounded men, some missing limbs, some blinded, some waiting to die. The medical staff do their best, but resources are limited, and morale is a constant struggle. Soldiers lie on cots, staring at nothing, trapped in bodies that no longer work the way they used to. Some refuse to speak. Some refuse to eat. They have survived combat, but they are not alive in any meaningful sense. Smoky changes that. When Win carries her into a hospital tent, heads turn. Men who have not moved in days sit up. Men who have not smiled in weeks reach out. She moves from cot to cot, allowing soldiers to touch her, to hold her, to feel her warmth. She does not judge. She does not recoil from bandages, from scars, from the smell of infection. She simply exists, present and calm, offering a moment of peace. Doctors and nurses notice the effect. Soldiers who interact with Smoky recover faster. They eat more. They engage with medical staff. They ask about her, about Win, about where she came from. It is a small shift, but in a field hospital where every percentage point of recovery matters, it is significant. Win does not have a name for what Smoky is doing. The term therapy dog does not exist yet. The concept of animal-assisted therapy is decades away from formal recognition. But Smoky is pioneering it, instinctively, without training or guidance. She is demonstrating something that will not be studied and codified until long after the war ends. By the time the war in the Pacific ends in August 1945, Smoky has flown 12 combat missions, survived 150 air raids, and visited countless field hospitals across New Guinea, the Philippines, and Okinawa. She has been with Win through typhoons, through jungle patrols, through the slow, grinding advance that eventually pushes Japanese forces back. She has slept in foxholes, in tents, in the cargo holds of transport planes. She has eaten military rations, survived tropical diseases, and adapted to a life no Yorkshire Terrier was ever bred to endure. When the war ends, Win faces a problem. Smoky is not a military asset. She cannot be transported home on official military channels. She has no documentation, no proof of service, no authorization to board a military transport ship. Win is told he must leave her behind, to be adopted by locals or left in the care of occupation forces. He refuses. He smuggles her aboard a transport ship in his duffel bag. For the entire journey back to the United States, Smoky hides, silent, patient, as Win sneaks her food and water. They arrive in California in December 1945. Win carries her off the ship, past inspectors, past officials, past every regulation designed to prevent exactly what he is doing. They return to Cleveland, Ohio, where Win resumes civilian life. Smoky becomes a local celebrity. Newspapers run stories about the tiny dog who survived the war. She appears on television shows, performs tricks at charity events, visits veterans' hospitals. The work she began in the Pacific continues, as wounded veterans find comfort in her presence, just as soldiers in field hospitals did years before. On several occasions, Smoky serves as an early warning system during her time in combat. Her acute hearing allows her to detect incoming aircraft before human soldiers can, giving units precious seconds to take cover. Wynne and other men learn to watch her behavior, recognizing patterns that indicate danger. When Smoky becomes agitated, ears pricked, body tense, they know to prepare for an attack. This is not formal training. It is adaptation both on Smoky's part and on the part of the men who learn to read her signals. Her presence provides a psychological anchor for the 26th Photo Reconnaissance Squadron, which operates under extreme stress. Crews fly unarmed planes deep into enemy territory, relying solely on speed and altitude to avoid being shot down. The psychological toll is immense. Men develop insomnia, anxiety, and depression. Some refuse to fly. Some break down entirely. Soldiers seek Smoky out before missions, spending a few minutes with her, petting her, talking to her. These interactions are brief, but they serve a purpose. They remind soldiers that something exists beyond the war, that life continues, that there are things worth protecting. One soldier, interviewed decades later, describes lying in a hospital tent after losing his leg below the knee. He had stopped speaking to anyone, refused physical therapy, and spent his days staring at the canvas ceiling. Then Wynne brought Smoky to his cot. The dog jumped up, curled against his side, and fell asleep. The soldier said it was the first time since his injury that he felt something other than rage and despair. He began speaking to medical staff the next day. He started physical therapy a week later. He credited Smoky with saving his life, not because she healed his wounds, but because she gave him a reason to keep fighting. Stories like this are common, but they are never compiled into official reports. The medical establishment of the 1940s does not have frameworks for understanding animal-assisted therapy. The idea that an animal's presence can influence recovery outcomes is not taken seriously in military medicine. Doctors understand morale in abstract terms, but they do not have methodologies for measuring its impact or integrating it into treatment protocols. Smoky's contributions exist in a space that the military does not know how to categorize. She is not a weapon. She is not equipment. She is not a trained asset. She is a presence, an influence, a factor in recovery that cannot be quantified but cannot be denied. The soldiers she helps know what she did. The medical staff who witness her work know what she did. But the military bureaucracy has no mechanism to recognize it. This gap between lived experience and institutional recognition is central to Smoky's story. The people who encounter her understand her value immediately. But the systems designed to document and reward military service cannot accommodate what she represents. She is too small, too informal, too outside the established structures. Her heroism is real, but it does not fit the mold. The field hospital visits are perhaps Smoky's most significant contribution, though they are never officially sanctioned. Wynne begins bringing her to hospitals on his own initiative, without authorization from medical staff or commanding officers. But once doctors and nurses see the effect she has, they not only allow it, they encourage it. They begin requesting Smoky's presence, asking Wynne to bring her to specific wards where morale is particularly low. Soldiers describe how seeing her makes them feel normal again, how she reminds them of home, of pets they left behind, of lives they fear they will never return to. For men facing amputations, blindness, or permanent disability, these moments of connection are lifelines. They are proof that they can still experience joy, still feel affection, still engage with the world in a meaningful way. Smoky's story also raises questions about the nature of courage and heroism in war. Traditional narratives of military heroism focus on aggression, on the willingness to face danger and inflict damage on the enemy. Medals are awarded for acts of valor in combat, for rescuing wounded soldiers under fire, for holding positions against overwhelming odds. These actions are undeniably heroic, but they represent only one dimension of what makes survival possible in war. Smoky's heroism is different. She does not kill enemies. She does not destroy equipment. She does not capture territory. She crawls through a pipe because she trusts the voice calling her. She sits beside wounded men because that is where she is placed. She comforts soldiers because that is what she does, instinctively, without training or expectation of reward. Her courage is not the courage of aggression. It is the courage of presence, of showing up in places where suffering is overwhelming and simply being there. This type of heroism is harder to quantify. It does not produce body counts or strategic victories. It does not appear in battle reports. But it is essential. Wars are not won solely by firepower and tactics. They are won by the ability of soldiers to continue functioning under conditions that should break them. Anything that sustains that function, that preserves morale and mental coherence, is as valuable as ammunition. Smoky represents a form of warfare support that military doctrine struggles to acknowledge. She is not combat power. She is sustaining power. She is the difference between a soldier who continues fighting and a soldier who gives up. Between a wounded man who fights to recover and a wounded man who surrenders to despair. These distinctions determine the outcome of campaigns, but they are invisible in after-action reports. The official military record does not mention Smoky. There is no file in the National Archives listing her service. There is no commendation signed by a commanding officer. The dogs recognized by the military during World War II are part of the formal K-9 Corps, trained at designated facilities, assigned service numbers, and deployed with specific units. Smoky is none of those things. She is an anomaly, existing in the margins of official history, remembered only because one man refuses to let her story disappear. This is not uncommon in war. The most significant contributions are often the ones that no one thinks to document. The small acts of courage, the improvised solutions, the moments of connection that sustain soldiers through impossible circumstances. These things do not fit into after-action reports. They do not appear in strategic analyses. They are not studied at military academies. But they are the difference between survival and collapse. Smoky's handler, William Wynne, spends decades advocating for her recognition. He contacts military historians, writes letters to veteran organizations, and speaks at events across the country. He is not seeking glory for himself. He is seeking acknowledgement that what Smoky did matters, that her contributions are real, that the soldiers whose lives she touched deserve to have that experience validated. Wynne writes a book about Smoky in 1996, documenting her wartime service in detail. The book becomes a primary source for historians and researchers studying animal contributions to World War II. It preserves stories that would otherwise be lost, accounts from veterans who interacted with Smoky, descriptions of her work in field hospitals and combat zones. Without this documentation, Smoky's legacy would exist only in the fading memories of aging veterans, disappearing when the last soldier who knew her passed away. But Wynne ensures that does not happen. He understands that Smoky's story is not his alone. It belongs to the soldiers she comforted, to the engineers she saved from danger, to the wounded men who felt human again because a tiny dog sat beside them. Throughout her post-war life, Smoky continues visiting veterans' hospitals across Ohio and surrounding states. She appears at veteran reunions, where aging soldiers light up at the sight of her, recounting stories of the war, of the jungle, of the day they first saw a 4-pound dog in a place where no dog should have been. These visits continue until her death in 1957, at the age of 14. She dies in Wynne's arms, in the same bed where she slept every night after the war. Wynne buries her with full honors in a veteran's cemetery, in a custom-made casket. In 2005, nearly 50 years after her death, a monument is erected in her honor at Cleveland Metroparks. It is a life-sized bronze sculpture of Smoky sitting inside a World War II combat helmet, the same helmet she used to sleep in during the war. The inscription reads, "Smoky, World War II's littlest hero," in recognition of her wartime service and her contributions to the field of therapy dogs. It is the first monument in the United States dedicated to a therapy dog. Today, therapy dogs are integrated into hospitals, schools, disaster response teams, and military support programs. They assist children with autism, provide comfort to trauma survivors, and support veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder. The entire field traces its origins, in part, to a 4-pound Yorkshire Terrier who was never supposed to be in a war zone. Smoky demonstrated capacities that humans had not yet learned to recognize or measure. She proved that healing is not just about medicine and surgery. It is also about connection, about presence, about the willingness to sit beside someone who is suffering and simply be there. Every veteran who finds comfort in a therapy dog's presence, every child who learns to trust through interaction with an animal, every trauma survivor who feels safe enough to begin healing. These are Smoky's descendants, in a sense. They are the living proof that what she did mattered, that her work continues, that the connections she made in field hospitals 80 years ago still ripple forward through time. Smoky was not trained for military service. She was never intended to save lives. She was an accident, a coincidence, a tiny creature found in a foxhole by a soldier who had no idea what he was discovering. And yet, she accomplished things that trained war dogs could not. She fit through a pipe too small for humans. She provided psychological support before the concept had a name. She demonstrated capacities that no one thought to look for, because no one imagined a dog like her could exist in a place like that. Her story is not about training. It is not about breeding. It is about adaptability, about the unpredictable ways that connection and trust manifest in extreme circumstances. Smoky did not save lives because she was taught to. She saved lives because a soldier believed in her, because engineers were desperate enough to try the impossible, because wounded men needed something to hold on to. And in doing so, she changed the world. What do you like about this animal? Tell me your favorite animal war story I should talk about next. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video.